Ted Brosem from the new International Recycling and Recovery business. Mayor Dan Kemmis. Brian McNitt from Recycle Missoula. Steve Loken, a local builder who has some very innovative ideas about recycling. And Doug Stewart representing Montana Recycling here in town. So I guess if we could just start maybe with you, John, and talk about your business for about 4 or 5 minutes, let people know what you're doing, and then after this is wrapped up, then we can open up for discussion, question and answer.
Okay. Thank you for having us here. I think this is very important for the city of Missoula. First thing I'd like to do is introduce a gentleman who tried to sneak in, but Mr. Dale Dahlgren is sitting in the middle back here, and I'd like him to stand up. Dale was instrumental in helping getting eco-compost off the ground back in 1977, and he's really the guy that should be up here. He's the expert on compost. Back in 1977, Dr. Joseph Horvath was teaching at the university here, and he started eco-compost as a method of taking waste materials, as you noticed, and I'm sure that with all the cans and paper you might have missed the sludge, but what the sludge is the end product that comes out of the Missoula Waste Treatment Facility. And Dr. Horvath took that sludge and mixed it with other organic materials and developed a system for composting these organic products into a marketable organic compost, which has been further developed into what's probably the premium growing material, at least in western Montana. And right now we're marketing our products as far as California and Arizona. We ship to Alaska, have shipped to Alaska, and we have substantial markets in Washington and Oregon, ship to Colorado and Utah. So we're shipping our waste materials out, as well as using a lot of it here in Missoula. Our future, we currently are operating the Missoula plant. We have a plant in Denver, Colorado, excuse me, which is using basically the same technology, a little bit different, and composting chicken manure, which is a serious waste product they have down there, with some of the wood byproducts, and coming up with an equivalent compost material for the market. We just signed a contract a couple weeks back with the city of Lewiston, Idaho, and we'll be composting over there in the near future. We're looking at different plants in Reno, Nevada, and we see the future of our type of business expanding very rapidly as the new regulations come into effect that control what happens to the sludge waste products. And I guess we'll just move on. I don't know who you want to next.
I'm Ted Brosnan with International Recycling and Recovery. We're in the process of building a facility where we will recycle waste oils and hydrocarbon contaminated soils and sludges. We will take the waste oils initially and clean them up, putting in layman's terms, that will be dehydrated and processed into a fuel, a high-grade burner fuel. With the soils and the sludges, the hydrocarbons will be recovered, and the resulting soil can be put back in the ground, used for backfill, topsoil, things of this nature. The recovered hydrocarbons can be processed through the liquids phase, and your gas and diesel can be sold on the open market as a fuel or used as for energy recovery in the process itself. There is a plant like this in Anchorage that has been operating since '83, and up there it's been very, very successful. And we're looking at one here in Missoula, which should be operational by late summer, and we're also looking at one in Southern California. And if you have any questions or anything, I'll answer questions later.
Montana Recycling was beginning to form probably back as early as 1970 with a friend of mine who is still my friend, and my partner, a gentleman by the name of Mark Richland. And We, back at that time, we had a lot of causes, as we know, Vietnam War, government spending, all types of causes, and the environment was also a cause back then as it is now. Most people, most of our friends at that time spoke a lot of different type of regulations and laws and that type of thing, and I guess the difference is that we actually rolled up our sleeves and tried to do something about it. And we formulated that on the lines, being that we were business students at the University of Montana. We formulated that along the lines of trying to make a business out of it, if nothing else, just to get us through college. Turns out it became a full-time job. It became a job that we started here in Missoula, that expanded to Billings, Montana, Great Falls, Bozeman, Butte, Helena. We now cover other areas such as Wyoming. We have equipment in Idaho also. We work with non-profitable organizations as well as other private sectors throughout Montana and the surrounding states. We started recycling the aluminum can. Actually, we started recycling the steel cans. Lucky Lager Brewing Company, and they had a promotional deal to buy back all the steel cans that they could bring back, and the Lucky Lager distributor at that time was very upset with the amount of warehouse space and what have you that he had to set aside for these products. And at that same time, back in Coors and Reynolds Aluminum devised the aluminum can for packaging, and they went to all the different canning manufacturers trying to find somebody that would package the aluminum can or use it. Nobody would, so they decided to devise their own plants, and that's basically how the aluminum can came to be. So with that in mind, all the other breweries started to push the other beer distributors, mainly as an advertising tool, I think, but to push them into recycling. We at that time, approached the distributors and said, the problem with this is that if I want to sell you a Coke can, I have to take it to the Coke distributor. If I want to sell you a Rainier can, I have to take it to the Rainier distributor, and so on and so forth. Why don't we make it convenient for the public? And so convenience and the service was one of the main themes that we had behind our business when we started the business. And from that, the aluminum can and the glass, we expanded into newspaper. And today, of course, we do a lot of different commodities, from your non-ferrous, your coppers, your brasses, your other aluminum scrap, as well as your ledger papers, computer printout, corrugated materials. So we have expanded in basically what we consider two divisions: household recycling as well as industrial recycling. And today, as you know, the federal government has put a lot of emphasis on recycling. And I think probably as much as 2 to 3 years ago thought that that might have been the total solution to our solid waste and our landfill problems that we have today and then. Unfortunately, I'd like to say that it is the total solution, but it isn't, and there's a lot of things that we need to do. It can be a big part of that, that solution, but unfortunately isn't a total solution. Thank you.
Next, maybe Steve. I'm curious, Steve Loken is a builder in Missoula. I usually think of builders as people that use materials. How in the world did you get involved in recycling?
Well, we not only use materials, but builders drink beer, and I was going to mention to Doug that the first failing they had at Missoula Recycling is they didn't recycle all of the Lucky Lager beer that they were. You should have recycled the beer, too, instead of just the can. We're builders. I have a construction company in Missoula, and we are concerned about the diminishing supply of good quality lumber for building houses. And as a result, what we're trying to do is right now, research that will lead us to different composite materials and the use of other materials besides large dimensional trees for building houses. And while I'm not actually recycling things myself yet, in terms of the construction site and the job site, because we're so resource intensive and we're not prone to change very readily, what we are trying to do is look through different agencies right now and research foundations that are looking at using different materials for building houses. And we're going to be building a house this fall that will be as, I guess, light an impact on resource use as possible. We're trying to try to stay away from dimensional lumber as much as possible, use non-structural stress skin panels for the wall assembly. We're also working with a Forest Products Lab out of Madison, Wisconsin, which is doing a lot of very interesting work now with recycled paper and recycled cellulose products to make structural wall panels. They're also looking at recycled craft paper and making honeycomb composite materials that can be structural floor panels or cassettes as well as wall systems. There's also a number of companies around the West Coast that are making high-density straw and agricultural composite products for blocks and wall panels. These are now being used in third world countries where they use waste straw that's normally now just shredded and burned in the fields, and they figure they can take every other crop every other year and turn it into building materials instead of just burning it. In Montana, around the Golden Triangle, there's a lot of wheat farmers there that have actually too much tilth in their soil, and they actually are looking for ways to pull some of the straw out instead of continuing to chop it into the fields. We think that it would be kind of interesting to be able to grow your building products every year and use that instead of waiting for an 80 to 100-year timber rotation before you cut large trees down. We think that paper, pulp, and cellulose is going to be more of an answer for our industry in construction because that right now seems to be the lion's share of the volume that we're throwing away. We have compostables, which take a good chunk of the volume, but a lot of the paper can be turned into pulp and cellulose. The problem with recycling of paper right now is as you continue to recycle it, the fibers get shorter and shorter, and you have to add more and more virgin material or other kinds of material to lengthen the strands to make it strong. In our building process, some of the wall systems that we're looking at can take the shorter and shorter fibered stuff and make high-density papier-mâché applications out of it and make structural wall and floor systems. So we think the end product of continuing recycling of paper can end up in houses. These can be fireproof and insect-proof as well. We are also looking at plastics, and right now, nationally, there's very little work going on with finding secondary markets or markets for secondary materials. The concern I have, while recycling is a very important issue in the country right now, I'd like not to have everybody just leave the recycling center thinking that they have a clean conscience and an environmental ethic, because what happens to that material once it gets into Doug's recycling center has become an enormous national problem. There are not oftentimes enough markets for some of the material that he ends up with. Paper and pulp is one of them, in fact, that they're getting very low return on now. The market's very flexible. We'd like to be able to create a demand or help create a demand in the building industry for some of these materials to create a steady need for some of the materials that you're recycling. The plastics that I was getting to, they're using some resins now as thermosetting plastics and mixing them in with wood fiber, chips, pulp, and paper, and making very strong studs and structural wall assemblies out of that material as well. One of the things that is very interesting to me is around the Canada and the eastern and western coast of the United States right now, they have waste exchanges. And these are kind of computer-controlled clearinghouses to look at what's going on in that region in terms of waste and byproduct and secondary material production. Who is producing what, and then what is their byproduct? Are they just piling up the byproduct, or is somebody else coming to get it? And the waste exchange network, as it works, is somebody who needs something for their industrial or manufacturing process, instead of going out of the region to get a virgin or a primary material, may just look down the street 5 miles and find somebody else is producing something as a waste product that could actually be incorporated into their manufacturing process. So it would really be exciting if in the Pacific Northwest or in Montana we could establish more of a regional waste exchange network to be able to handle some of that material. The other thing is, I guess the last thing I'd like to say is there's a number of builders around the country that are very concerned about their resource-intensive industry. Not only do we develop a lot of undeveloped land and create housing for more and more people as it reaches farther and farther from centers of cities, but we also are a very resource-intensive industry. We use a lot of glass. Last year we used 12 million acres of glass. We used 1.3 billion cubic yards of concrete, which could be supplemented by waste fly ash from coal-fired generating plants, which right now is a toxic waste. They have to pay a lot of money to dispose of it. We can use that pozzolanic fly ash as an additive to concrete, so we can radically strengthen our concrete and use a lot less cement in the process. And also, we use a lot of wood. And if we can use shorter fibered or recycled materials instead of virgin stands of trees, we'd find that we could still build a good product. So what I'm getting to is there's a number of builders forming loose-knit networks around the United States right now, and loosely calling it Builders for Social Responsibility. And there's 4 chapters that I know of in the United States and Canada now that are actively pursuing alternatives to building products that are not as resource intensive, at least primary resource intensive, as what we've been traditionally using in the past. My industry is not really prone to change. We're real conservative people by nature, and I guess that kind of brings us down to, if we're really conservative, then maybe we would really conserve and use a lot less of what we think we need to build houses for people, as well as recycling houses in rehabilitation and retrofit work instead of constantly building new structures.
Junior chemist, perhaps, since we've heard from some people in the private industry, maybe you could give us the public sector view of maybe what the role of Missoula as a city has been with recycling, to your knowledge, and then currently being discussed is both in terms of the pickup of recyclables, getting recycling, happening from the supply point, and also, as Steve mentioned, maybe from the demand point of creating markets for recycled paper or whatever. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what the city has done and might plan to do in the future.
Well, let me just change the focus just slightly here. I find it very interesting to be on a panel like this with so many entrepreneurs who have found a way of making livings by being engaged in resource recovery of various kinds. I think this is an interesting snapshot of a part of Missoula, or various parts of Missoula, that we can easily take for granted. And just for that, I appreciate what Recycle Missoula has done tonight with the slideshow and the panel presentation to make us aware of what's going on. And I think the Recycle Missoula itself is an example of another kind of entrepreneurship. It's an example of putting human energy and human resources to work in what I think has been a very impressive way. And I really congratulate you. I'm proud of the fact that you have done this in Missoula, and I hope that you continue to do it, and I trust that you will. I think that you're on a very important course here, and that you have caught the attention of the community in a good and important way, and I think the turnout this evening is testimony to that. It occurs to me that there's one enterprise in town that is now engaged in recycling in a very big way that didn't get included here, and I'm sure that that there are others as well. But I got invited a little over a week ago to go out to Stone Container Corporation and be part of the ceremony there, greeting the train that had arrived there carrying several boxcar loads of cardboard to be recycled in their new recycling facility, which is a very major investment in our community. That train had gone throughout the Midwest and the Western United States, and everywhere that it stopped there were press conferences, and everywhere there were press conferences they said that they were on their way to Missoula, Montana with this trainload of cardboard. And so Missoula has appeared on the map as a major recycling center already. And I think that there is something to be learned from that experience. Part of the reason that I think that Stone has gotten into this is that when they bought the plant here from Champion, that I always thought they were taking a terrible risk, because as long as Champion owned it, at least Champion knew where the source of supply for the pulp was going to come from, because Champion owned forests and sawmills and so on. Stone didn't own any forests and didn't own any sawmills. And so it always seemed to me to be a kind of a risk for them to have bought a pulp mill. When I asked them about that, they said, well, we realize that risk, and we're very aggressive about protecting our supply, and one of the main ways that we're protecting it is through recycling. And so the appearance of this recycling center out here is part and parcel of the recognition of the fact that we face a dwindling supply of a variety of kinds of natural resources, in this case, old-growth timber. But in terms of what Missoula can do, there are obviously things that Missoula as a large institution can do, the city can do, and we are looking very seriously at switching to the use of recycled paper, which is going to be somewhat more expensive, but we're going to do our very best to do that. And we will be encouraging recycling in town in whatever ways that we can. But I would just like to talk to you real briefly in a more general way about what I think Missoula, not so much as a city, but Missoula as a community can do. Because I think that it's important that we recognize that while on the one hand something like recycling is something that we can do as individuals, and that's one of the great things about it, is that there are so many things that we can't do anything about as individuals, but this is something we can do as individuals. But finally, I think the challenge that we face is not simply to behave as individuals, but that it's as communities that we have to face the challenges that are posed that recycling tries to respond to. And just to get at that, I'd like us to think for just a minute about the fact that recycling is one of those areas where the two arenas of ecology and economy so clearly intersect. And if you think about how it is that they intersect, you see it here at this table, the fact that these people are all involved in something that helps our ecology, and yet it is an economic activity. Those two words obviously have something in common. What they have in common is the Greek root of eco, which meant household. What ecology and economics is all about, finally, is householding. It's about the recognition of the fact that we are all members of one household. I think that it's in those terms that the really exciting possibilities exist for Missoula, that in addition to what we can do as individuals, that we can, if we set our minds to it, create an atmosphere here that says to the world, we understand ourselves as a household. We understand ourselves as a family inhabiting a common space. We understand ourselves as having some responsibilities that go with that inhabiting of a common place. And I just want to end by talking about some of those responsibilities. I think that it's sometimes very easy to be very self-righteous about something like recycling. And it does give you a good feeling if you do it, and it makes you kind of superior to anybody who doesn't. But in the long run, the challenge of householding, among other things, I think comes down to a matter of respect. What recycling is, among other things, is a recognition that even the lowliest object deserves a kind of respect beyond being buried in a landfill. If we can show that kind of respect to aluminum cans, then the very least that we can do is to show it to one another. And that when we find ourselves inhabiting a place with people that we sometimes find it a challenge to live with, that part of what we need to do is to challenge ourselves, to say we are part of this household together. And that if we're really going to get beyond self-righteousness and do something that lasts, that what we've got to do is to bring to our relations with people the same kind of simple respectfulness that we bring to our relationship with things. And that's something that I think that Missoula has the capacity to do in a good and lasting way. And that, I realize, is not exactly an answer to your question, but I hope that it gets close to it anyway. Thank you.
Brian, is there anything you'd like to say before we open up for questions?
A little bit. I know we went over a little bit of the history of Recycle Missoula, but I'm so proud of all the work that all of our volunteers have done in the last 6 months. I'd like to just kind of review it a little bit and tell you a little bit more, I guess, about what we've done. Like the slideshow said, we started in September, and there was probably 6 or 8 people that started. and we were interested in making people more aware of the issue of recycling and getting more people involved. It didn't take long, about 2 weeks, and we had another 10 people or so, and they were interested in helping. And then we got a truck donated by a local resident who was interested in recycling. And we started out with about 500 homes in the university area recycling with once a week pickups for aluminum, glass, newspaper, cardboard. Since then, in the last 6.5 months, we've grown in a lot of different ways. Now we have probably about 60 people that are actively involved in Recycle Missoula, volunteering various amounts of time on various projects. We recycle materials from about 2,000 homes that we pick up weekly. We have a very enthusiastic education committee who put together this meeting, the slideshow, curriculums for almost every grade from kindergarten through 12th grade. They've gone out and done programs at several schools, given talks at several civic organizations. A project that we're just getting started is with the downtown businesses, trying to get them involved in recycling, and there's a lot of support there. We've had really good luck with that. And then also this Saturday we're going to have 2 drop-off centers downtown that we're going to be dedicating. Mayor Kemmis is going to help us out with that on Saturday, and people will be able to take their recyclables, their aluminum, glass, newspapers downtown and drop them off. So I feel really excited about what the people in Recycle Missoula have done so far. As far as the waste that we've been able to divert in the last 6 months, roughly about 1,200 pounds of aluminum, 12,000 pounds of cardboard, 21,000 pounds of glass, and 45,000 pounds of paper. That just the paper relates into about 195,000 gallons of water saved from processing, 110,000 kilowatt hours of electricity saved, and roughly about 500 trees that we've been able to keep from being cut down. So I'm really excited about what we've been able to do so far, and I'm really excited that this many people have shown up to show their concern and hopefully get involved. So hopefully we'll have some good questions and go from here.
So, if you have questions, far away. You raise your hand and we can direct the questions wherever you like that.
Doug? Sorry, I don't know my last name. I was wondering, as far as recycling goes, what's the future of plastics? Or do you think you'll be recycling them soon, or?
Plastic recycling is something that we're just starting on right now. The milk jugs, which are all real easily to identify, is the first plastic that our company is going to devote their time to and developing at the present time. In fact, that's going to probably be one of our announcements for Earth Day, which you guys know now, is that we are going to start recycling those plastic containers. We're not going to be able to start out paying anything for them. We're going to use the proceeds to go to an organization here in Missoula, Friends to Youth, and that's what we're also doing with the magazines. The plastic industry as a whole has been behind recycling, but they've been very slow. Anybody that's done any research at it at all, I know myself as a recycler for almost 19 years now, been very frustrated with the plastic industry, and I'm very frustrated with their movements in the packaging industry in great bounds and leaps against the packages such as glass, which is 100% recycled. So today we're starting to see, because of different threats, legislation threats in the state of Washington, for example, and throughout the state of California and Florida, we're starting to see the plastic industry start to react to that legislation. And a little bit maybe late, but at least they're reacting in a positive way. So we're seeing today a lot of industries in the plastic industries particularly develop new products. The biggest problem that we have is that there are not enough markets for a lot of the plastics that exist right now in the marketplace. But I would think within the next probably 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a tremendous change in the technology. Technology is here already, but within the volumes and the economic structure of that particular industry.
Along the same lines with what Styrofoam, I heard you recently were going to start doing that, but you were going to CFCs are gonna be allowed?
Well, styrofoam and is also a form.
You need to speak up a little bit, so some people in the back can't-
Okay, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just stand up. I talk better when I stand up and move anyway. You hear me better? Okay, styrofoam is, and other forms of, like other forms of plastic, create a very serious problem to our landfills. They do not decompose just by the nature of the product. And we see now that companies that are using styrofoam, for example, for packaging of their particular products, are now starting to make commitments to try to find markets for these particular commodities. And I'm somewhat of an opportunist. If I see a possibility of hooking a large industry once they've opened their mouth, I will do everything in my power to make them commit to act on that on that statement. And today we have large industries that are now starting to make those statements. One of them happens to be McDonald's. And McDonald's happens to have a gentleman in Montana that has national recognition with the McDonald's company nationwide, and we are going to use him as a source to be able to create market, hopefully somewhere within the Northwest, so that we're able to recycle, those type of products. And you see those egg cartons, and you see in the grocery store that says this is recycled. Well, it might be recycled maybe in California or someplace where there's a market close by that can use it. But in Montana, economically speaking, it isn't so here. And unfortunately, we find a lot of different manufacturers of a lot of different products using the word recycling, putting recycling on it, basically what I consider conceiving the public into believing that that product is recyclable, therefore they should buy that over a pulp product. And these are things that we need to do in our industry, is educate the public what is recyclable and what isn't recycled in your communities.
Should we start saving our PET containers? Do you anticipate starting to recycle those? I guess this is for the Montana recycling.
Yes,
They're
and
pretty popular, I guess.
yes and no. I could not commit to saying that we're going to recycle those within the next week or 6 months, or it might take 12 months. We do such a number of commodities right now. Anybody, I'll invite anybody that would like to come on down and take a tour, and you get an idea basically, what happens in a recycling operation. And what you see from the outside when you get inside is usually somewhat impressive with all the equipment and the people running about. Everybody's active. There's not a wasted moment. And you'll find a lot of different commodities that you do not realize that are being recycled already in the Missoula area as well as the state. The PET bottles, again, are something that we're focusing on, and plastic is going to be an area that's kind of a new frontier for us, and one that we've been following. I have a library my file's got to be 5 times that, this high on plastic recycling, from all the propaganda 10 years ago to what it is today, which is still a lot of propaganda. However, those markets are becoming closer and closer, and we know that within the next 12 to 24 months, we are actually going to have facilities located in the Northwest to process plastic. When that happens, then we have an ongoing market, a place where we can get rid of all different types of plastics, from the PET bottles to the plastic bags, the milk jugs. At that particular point, we have something that's going to be a little more stable. Right now, in the location of where we are in Montana, just by the nature of where we are compared to where the marketplace is, we're a little gun shy of getting involved in making a big economic commitment. That's why what we always encourage everybody to do, when we encourage Recycle Missoula and anybody else that's getting involved in recycling, is start simple. Start with 1 or 2 commodities and build from there. So we basically are following our own advice for a change.
I just have one more question. What do you do with the magazines and catalogs?
Now, the catalogs we are not taking, unless they're the small little catalogs that basically that are very similar to a magazine. The magazines are basically being shipped to Jefferson Smurfett, which is using them for the repulping. They want the high grade of paper. That's why they don't want the Sears catalog or Montgomery Ward's. And what they're doing is making newspaper out of that product.
You're making newspaper out of coated stock?
Magazines, not me, Jefferson Smurfett. Yeah,
So they are making coated stock?
right. Something that they just started doing here probably about 2 years ago, they started experimenting with it, that we started to collect magazines on an experimental basis and shipping them on into them, probably down near 2 years ago. Then with the newspaper market doing what it has done, we felt it was, we wanted to keep newspaper recycling going, so we put all of our efforts and our investments into newspaper, feeling that the demand was going to increase eventually again for newspaper, at least in the Northwest. On the East Coast, it may take 5 years or longer before that recovers. But we do see some movement in that area and markets develop. However, Jefferson Smurfett has continued to, they kind of backed off the magazines to start out with right after they got going in them, and now they're starting to process those magazines again. So we're gonna start doing it again. Eventually, our intention is basically to buy everything that we can from the public. Montana Recycling, we take donations for charitable organizations and what have you. Some of these commodities that we're dealing with are going to really be at a break even, like green glass, for example. Green glass is something now that we cannot economically recycle. However, we're committed to it, and we'll continue to take green glass.
The slideshow showed just regular tin cans that, as being recyclable, but I see on this list that only one place in town takes them. And I'm wondering what makes tin hard to recycle, why is that a problem?
Well, tin in the past, number one has been the tin can has been very low market for the aluminum can, or the tin can. That's why we haven't recycled the tin can. But it is, over the years, it has been in the past, one of the products that we did take, one of the very few that we've taken on a donation basis, in which we used to send those cans to the mining companies out of Butte to use in their leaching process. We do have new markets developing in tin. We are like white goods, for example, your refrigerators and stoves, and 200 days ago, hardly anybody in Montana took or would even buy back those materials. Today, we started doing it in Great Falls, Montana, as an experimental basis, and we were able to devise a market. That particular market may also open up for the tin can. So we have a national corporation that we've been able to do some things using the equipment that we have that nobody thought about using it in that way. And now we have some recognition in that area. So now the command is coming down from their corporate headquarters is that if Montana Recycling wants to try a new package, let's take it in and see what it does. So now what we've done is given them a means and a way of packaging products that were unacceptable in the past, now to make it more economically feasible to get it from places as far away as Montana. So I think what we're starting to do, and one of the things that we've kind of pioneered different areas like bimetal can and things like that in the past. Just another area that we're starting to work on, and I think we're going to develop a market for tin cans. But we will eventually have a market within the state of Montana. At least that's what we're shooting for. And the plastic market that we're shooting for, there's a chance that that can be located also in the state of Montana. It's, again, something else that we're going to try to shoot for.
Is that going to include other light metals besides tin can?
Such as,
Like steel.
oh yeah, yeah.
The Pacific Hyper won't take light steel.
Right, we are now. We're taking all your galvanized metal, with the white goods and what have you. We're taking fenders, doors off of cars. We're taking all that material now. Only in 3 cities. Let me clarify that. That's only in Billings, Missoula, and Great Falls. The other towns, though, very shortly we will be with our arrangement with Stone now. We're going to need the backhaul anyway, so we'll probably take that material back to those other 2 places of process.
That I have is in motor oil in particular, there's lots of metals, some of which are additives to the oil and some of which are from the engine.
Wear particles, right.
Serious problem to bury that kind of stuff.
Well, what we do, okay, you take, depending on the analysis of the waste oil, you you end up with your metals, your sludge that's left over. Okay, that is further processed in the soil and sludge operation. Depending on what the contaminants are at that point, if you have, I'm going to switch over to the soil end of it. If you take soil and recover the hydrocarbons and there are no heavy metals, that soil can go into the ground or use for cover. You can take it to the landfill and use for cover. If there are hazardous constituents in it, such as lead, chrome, arsenic, cadmium, a number of different metals, at that point, that residue is shipped to a hazardous waste landfill. And we will end up with a certain amount of condensed lead, arsenic, chrome, things of this nature that will be sent out. Nothing will be processed, or dumped in our area. You have to send it to an EPA-approved facility.
I just wanted to mention that I was up at Hungry Horse Dam a few weeks ago, and they have been using the same oil to lubricate the generators in that dam since 1954. They just have a closed cycle, and they clean the oil, and they reuse it, and they've only had to make up about 15 gallons of oil just due to evaporation since 1954. Burlington Northern has had a re-refining facility, I think it was in Billings or in Laurel, Montana, until that closed down in the late 60s or early 70s. So the technology to re-refine oil is here, but again, the volumes and the problems that Ted has to deal with is, how about all the other junk that we throw into oil? If it's just oil that he knows is oil and it comes from boaters, that's fine, but it's all the other additives and stuff that we throw into oil that can really confuse the issues, not only for his business, but for Stewart's and for John's, everybody's. I mean, the sorting of this stuff is becoming an absolute nightmare, and then packagers now are starting to combine plastics with paper, so we can't tear it and shred it apart, and it can't even be recycled. So there's real headaches there, too.
One quick note on what you brought up. In the early 70s, there were 250-some re-refiners in the United States. Within 8 years, from, say, by 1980, there was 5. Due to the processes that they used, and the main process was a clay filtration. They had filters that had very dense clay that they forced the motor oil through to take out all the wear particles and the junk that makes your oil dirty. And the process works, but what do you do with all this clay? There's tons and tons and tons of clay that you got. Most of those places, those re-refiners, are now Superfund sites.
Regulating them in such a way that they might be encouraged to develop some kind of recycling plant.
I don't know of any power that the city has to regulate the garbage company in that way. The state possibly would have some of that power. I doubt very much if the city does as things now stand. That's in part a kind of long-term political challenge that cities should have more of that kind of power than they do, and especially in Montana, where we have very weak city governments in those terms. Apart from that, I do think that it's absolutely crucial that BFI be part of any overall long-range strategy that we might put together for recycling. And that's something that I didn't talk about, but it is something that I believe the city is in a position to do, and that is to help coordinate a discussion and some long-term strategic planning about a recycling strategy for the whole community. I would be glad to serve in that kind of facilitating capacity, and I would certainly expect BFI to participate in any such discussions.
I should add that we did invite BFI to attend tonight. They said they didn't have a spokesman available, so we sort of...
Say, I might address that question also. Max Bauer, who is the acting manager or the general manager for the BFI in the Missoula area, and he also does some regional work, is working with the different recyclers in the area right now and setting up different types of collection systems at the landfill, either in the rural areas as well as areas like Missoula. So they are in the process right now of addressing that, and plans are being taken to involve them more and more into the collection of recyclable materials. Instead of putting them in a landfill, taking them down to a center similar to ours where they can be processed and then sent to a mill.
Does the city have plans to help out with any kind of household hazardous waste roundup to help, kind of facilitate, make it a little bit more easy for people to collect this stuff and then maybe, distribute it to the private business?
Well, the city doesn't have any plans for that right now, and I think that, again, it's the kind of thing that the city can serve as a facilitator for planning for that kind of thing. I think that it would be a mistake to think that the city was going to devise a service and tax people to provide that service. I think that it's the kind of thing that as a community as a whole, we have to figure out how to solve that kind of problem. And I think that city government can serve as a kind of focus for figuring out how to solve the problem.
And
But-
it's expensive.
Right.
Any materials will you take at eco-compost from private individuals or, apartment car, that sort of thing? Do you ever
Right.
gather?
We can accept grass clippings, clean grass clippings, leaves. We run against the same problems that everybody else in the recycling business. A pickup truck comes in, it's nice grass clippings on top, they go to dump, and there's tin cans and everything else in it. And we end up spending our time going through sorting this all out. We are somewhat limited in what we can take by the state, and the EPA controls what we can take. We would like to become more involved in taking yard waste in particular. I think that's one area that we could really assist in the Missoula area, is taking the yard waste and recycling it. I think motivation is very important. Getting people motivated to recycle anything is a problem. And if you took a survey in this room of people that would be willing to bring their clean yard waste out to our plant, we might get a lot of hands. If you stepped out at noon in downtown Missoula and asked that same question, people look at you like you're crazy. So we have to find methods to motivate people so that they want to participate in whatever recycling we're trying to do.
I would like to see the city council or the county take steps to work with CFI and introduce some economic incentives for recycling. And if there is an added charge, put that added charge back into groups like Recycling Missoula for education and better service. Reduce the
Yeah, actually, I think that you misunderstand what I mean when I say to work together. I think that Dale Dahlgren really came a lot closer to it. When I talk about human nature, I include fully the economic side of human nature. And I think that what we really need to do, and I think the good advice that we're getting here tonight, is that if you're going to think about government policies that might impact here, to think very hard about how to make those policies really fit in with economic reality. I think that that's what Doug is saying, among other things, that you can devise thousands of public policies that don't take account of the market and of real human behavior. And we can wear ourselves out real easily and frustrate ourselves tremendously by fighting over public policies that won't have that long-term effect. And when I say work together, what I mean is to take account of what the market is really all about and then look for ways to bring real market pressures to bear. The way that I look at what you're talking about is that there are ways in which the market doesn't work, what's what economists call externalities, that by behaving in certain ways that we externalize the costs of our activities. We externalize them particularly onto the environment. if you can internalize those costs. That's what Seattle has done. It has internalized those costs. It has said there is a cost of producing this much garbage. You're going to pay that cost. Well, all of that is making the market real. That's smart. That's good thinking. That's good public policy.
Well, I'd just like to add a little bit to that too, in that Recycle Missoula, although we are called Recycle Missoula, we view recycling as the last thing you should do. It's kind of the last chance for that product. And we like to, you've probably already heard of the 3 R's: reuse, recycle, and reduce. And reduce is not the last thing you should do. Reduce is the first thing, and that's the thing we're really trying to get into our education now, is that we need to think about every time you go to buy something, is this recyclable? Do I really need to have this thing? Is there some other product I can buy that has less packaging? Packaging makes up about 40% of everything that goes into the landfill, and a lot of that is stuff that we just don't need. And so our education is going to be much more focused towards that, and although we need recycling, we like to have it as the last resort. So that's one of our main emphasis.
If you'd like to get involved with Recycle Missoula, you're welcome to talk to any one of myself or Brian afterwards, and you can get your name or whatever, and you can maybe help out with the neighborhood pickups or the education program or whatever. We'd just like to get as many people involved as possible. So I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want to especially thank our panel members for providing some information tonight. It was very good.